What's up, guys? It was 1-1 last night, so wound up being a loss, a very slight loss, because the one that won was the Brooklyn Nets. Outright win, had a little bit of that money line sprinkle there, so they were able to do it and win outright, so at least there was that. VCU should have won, I would say, having them as the home underdog, and they wind up going into overtime. That pretty much tells you were on the right side of it, and they threw the game away, man. They had plenty of chances to take that game, to win that game, both in regulation and in overtime. As far as I could tell, I wasn't actually watching it, but I think it was the right side and just did not land my way. So that was the deal there. Both games are actually really close the whole way. So what can you do about it? And that is basically what you want when you're taking underdogs. And yeah, that's the way it is. You think the team is like just they have a little bit of value on them, and I think they showed that they did. But 1-1, what can you do? It's a very small losing day. Moving on, we're only going to have one play today. I just put my NFL videos up. I think it should be up now. I have 3 plays in the NFL this week. None of them are on tonight's game, which is a really ugly, horrific game, which I talked about in my video, so I don't want to go too into detail with it, keep this short, but it's New England at Pittsburgh. Really hideous, ugly game. It's probably the lowest total in the NFL this season as far as how the total is lined. It's like down to 30. It's just absolutely ridiculous. Some of it, I think, is a little bit factoring in the Pittsburgh offensive injuries to Pickett and Najee Harris, but I think Pittsburgh is in like the injured player theory spot a little bit because they are without those guys. Trubisky is coming in. He's got experience. He's been on the team for a while. He knows the system. So I don't think it's much of a downgrade at all. It might even be an upgrade the way Pickett has been playing. I don't think it's much of a downgrade to Trubisky. With Harris, I think they'll be able to fill in for him with some of their other backs there. I don't think it's that much of an issue there. So I do lean to Pittsburgh slightly there because I think with those injuries there and with how horribly they played against a very not good Arizona team getting embarrassed at home in that weird, like lightning-ridden game last week with multiple lightning delays, that I think Pittsburgh's an embarrassed team. I think they're going to want to step it up because of the injuries and because they're embarrassed there. By the way, I don't remember the NFL ever having like this many weather delays for games like this. I think everyone's just becoming a little bitch, man. That's what I think. This is the NFL. Like you play through these like thunderstorms, rainstorms. I don't know what's going on with that, but Pittsburgh, yeah, I think they're the more embarrassed team, as bad as New England has played recently. I think losing to the Chargers, even though you scored 0, doesn't look as embarrassing, as bad as losing by 14 at home to Arizona, even though Arizona, I don't want to talk about it in detail, but I am anyway. I talked about it in my video, but Arizona did have that one like really big like takeaway. There was that huge Pittsburgh turnover that swung the game in Arizona's direction as well. So the final score looks a little bit worse than it actually was. Patriots, yeah, their offense has been playing terribly for weeks now, but every time you think they're in a bounce back spot, they don't bounce back. So I don't know. And I think I would much rather lean towards Mike Tomlin to bounce back as the better coach than Belichick, as far as we're concerned at this point. Tomlin has at least been better in the bounce back spots, at least up to this point. Yeah, this season. So and Tomlin. Just historically, he's been good in spots like that. And this is one of Pittsburgh's worst home losses under his tenure, the one to Arizona. So there is that. And with the shorter week, I think the shorter week benefits the home team when it's a venue that the road team doesn't play in that often, which is the case here. So having that short turnaround time and not having to travel, I think also benefits the Steelers. So my lean is to the Steelers in that one very slightly, but there's no way I want to get involved in that game at all. And I think the public, their perspective, they're probably going to think there's a little bit of value on New England there. Even as bad as he seems to play it, I think they might look and say, how is a team like the Steelers, who can't score, laying 6 points, even though they have the better record? Of course, the Patriots have been awful, but in a game like this where both teams have looked so ugly, it just looks like a lot of points to be laying. So that's the way I look at that. Moving to today's slate, I'm not going to have any plays in college basketball, with a really short college basketball slate. The only really big game tonight is Iowa State. I mean, we could sit back and enjoy that rivalry game with Iowa State being the better team, and they're favored by 7, but could be an interesting game in that one. NBA, we have the night is dedicated to these in-season tournament semifinals now, which are all in Las Vegas. The Bucks are a 4.5-point favorite over the Pacers with 83% of the cash on them, but 78% of the tickets. The Pacers are coming off that huge upset of the Celtics at home. So that is a big win to be coming off of. So it's possible that the Pacers run out of steam. So my slight lean, I guess, would be to the Milwaukee Bucks there just because of that factor. The Pacers played like a much bigger effort game in the quarterfinals there. And I think they finally might like run out of gas and like run into it. But of course, you're not going to be unfocused when you're playing the Milwaukee Bucks. So that's the way I look at that. And then in the other game, I think neither team really has reason to be unfocused either with Pelicans Lakers. Lakers are up from 1-2, 66% of the cash on them, but 64% of the tickets. So it looks like both favorites have a little bit of the cash discrepancy there. I don't even know which way I would lean in that one, really. Not much of a read. Lakers just beat the Suns, which is probably a bigger win than the Pelicans beating the Kings, even though the Pelicans were the big underdog in that one. The bigger underdog in the Lakers. Well, I think the Lakers were a favorite actually by a couple of points against the Suns. Pelicans were a 4-point underdog. And first, I was on the Pelicans and the Pacers in those quarterfinal matchups, so I won both of those with outright underdog wins. So that was awesome. But I just don't know which way I would lean in that one. The slight lean would be to the Bucks in the Bucks Pacers game, just because I think the Pacers could run out of steam playing teams back to back that are both really good. Pelicans Lakers, I don't know. I see that more as kind of a toss up as far as how to read that. Both teams coming off pretty big wins. So nothing else there. And in the NFL, by the way, as I mentioned in my video, I'll mention real quick, the Steelers is a 6-point favorite. They have 62% of the cash, but 54% of the tickets. So they have the cash discrepancy on their side as well. So I don't know what else to think about that. Moving to the NHL, I only have one play here. I'm being very selective, even though there are teams that I think are in bad spots. I think Washington is in a bad spot. So at first I was looking like maybe I wanted to go against Washington because they're coming home from a long road trip, a 5-game road trip that took them out west. And they went 2-3 2-3 on the road trip and lost the last 2 to the Golden Knights, and then really got blasted by Arizona, who's been playing pretty well recently. Now Washington's coming back home, and that comes with its distractions. As I always say, even if you played poorly at the end of that road trip, it's still a distraction spot. But the thing that mitigates this one is that they have 2 days off. They're playing Dallas, who's a big team, even though they have the Rangers next to her. And that's an even bigger game for Washington, really, because the Rangers are probably even better than Dallas, record-wise, at least they are. And they're in Washington's division, so I think that's a little bit of a bigger game. But when you have Dallas coming into your house, I still think that's reason to be focused a little bit. And Dallas, I think, is not in a good spot either, as they're playing a third game in 4 nights, all in different cities, actually a 4th and 6th, all in different cities. And they've had a really packed schedule, actually, going back to November 28th. They've only had the 29th, the 1st, the 3rd, and the 5th off. So, that's a really packed schedule. And they played all those games in different cities, actually, because all of them except one of the Tampa Bay games were all on the road. So Dallas's schedule is just a mess. It's really packed. They have Vegas up next when they return home. They just lost to Florida. So this game is actually sandwiched between the 2 Stanley Cup finalists from last year as well. So I don't want to play Dallas either. There's no way I can play Dallas when they're in a back-to-back, third game in 4. They've been playing in all these different cities with almost no time off, and it's sandwiched between Florida and Vegas. It's almost a worse spot for Dallas than it is for Washington here, really, even though Washington's returning from a road trip. So I can't get there with Washington either, but I think I actually would lean Washington slightly, even though I almost never would lean to a team returning from a road trip. But I'm not going to play it, but that's the way I look there. I think the Islanders might be in a decent spot to bounce back. I just really don't want to lay a price where I don't think you're going to find value on the Islanders, even though I think the Islanders are probably better than people actually think they are. So maybe there is still value there. Like the price looks high to be laying with a team like the Islanders, who are close to a 500 team, really, and they have a ton of overtime losses. So that's kind of crazy. The Islanders have been playing a lot of close games, 7 overtime losses, a ton. But they're playing the Blue Jackets, who have 5 overtime losses, which is also a lot. The Islanders, I think, probably are in an embarrassed mode because they return home from a road trip. And I mentioned that was a bad spot for them. They'd beaten Carolina and Florida to finish that road trip. Big wins, came home playing the San Jose Sharks. And the Islanders, I believe they're winning by a lot in that game, and they completely lapsed. The game was played pretty close statistically. But yeah, the Islanders were winning 4-1 in the third period, and they wound up losing the game. The Sharks, and it was 4-2 in the last few minutes of the third period, and Hurdle wound up pulling off a hat trick, getting 2 goals in the final few minutes of regulation there for San Jose. Just ridiculous comeback for San Jose, and then San Jose wound up winning in overtime. Just a crazy comeback for San Jose, who has been playing a bit better than when they were kind of that laughing stock earlier in the season. But yeah, I just don't really want to lay the price in that one with the Islanders, but I do think that the Islanders are in the bounce back spot because they had that embarrassing loss to San Jose, whereas Columbus played a tough game against the LA Kings and they just wound up succumbing, man. I think that was a game where I think the Kings were in a bad spot, and Columbus, even though Columbus was coming off a fairly tough game against the Bruins, Columbus was winning that game 3-0 into the third period, and they give up 3 goals really quickly in the third period to let the game get tied, and then LA wound up beating them in overtime. So just, yeah, Columbus, they're not really in a good spot after coming off of that. So the lean would be to the Islanders, but I can't quite get there with that one, laying that price with it. Is there any other game I wanted to talk about here on the slate besides the game that I'm actually on? I mean, that probably puts San Jose in a bad spot because they had such a ridiculous comeback, crazy comeback. They probably got to be in a letdown spot. You got Detroit, though. They're on a win streak and they're returning from a road trip. It's probably a little bit of a better spot for Detroit, but I don't really want to get there with them either, even though they're returning from a 2-game road trip, which isn't that long of a road trip. Detroit's up from -280, or they're down from -285 to -281 is a huge home favorite with 94% of the cash, but 93% of the tickets. I don't think I can quite get there with that. I should talk about the market read on all 3 of these, actually. But yeah, San Jose, I think they're in that letdown spot there. I just don't think there's going to be that much value to be had laying a big price to go against them. The Dallas-Washington game, Dallas is actually down from -145 to -133 as a road favorite with 88% of the tickets on them, but 70% of the cash. So there is reverse line movement. The market read is pretty strong on Washington there. Dallas is, as I pointed out, they're definitely in a bad spot. It's just Washington returning from such a long road trip. I just can't do it with Washington, but the market read does look pretty heavily in favor of Washington. There were the nice cash discrepancy on Washington, Dallas being the public team, and the reverse line moving against Dallas there, reverse movement against Dallas, against the public road favorite there. So a lot of strong indicators in the market on Washington there, at least. But there are ones in the game that I'm going to be on as well. So there we go with that. And then, what else we got? So many games here, man. I don't know what else to do here. Is that it for the games that I was looking at? Yeah, probably. I thought there was one other team that was in a bad return home spot that I was going to mention briefly, and it was another spot where I still can't do it. But maybe I'm not right about that. Maybe I'm wrong. Am I wrong? I don't even know. Oh no, it's Seattle. Yeah, Seattle had a bad 0-4 road trip that took them out to the Midwest and then up to Eastern Canada. They lost all those games, and now they're returning home to face New Jersey. It is a bad spot for Seattle, but I can't get there with New Jersey either because they just beat the Vancouver Canucks. So that's a big win for New Jersey there. So I can't get there with New Jersey either. It looks like the market read is somewhat on them as they're up from -135 to -146 as the road favorite there, moneyline favorite on New Jersey. But it looks like they have 99% of the cash, but 95% of the tickets. So they're a heavily public road favorite as well, even though it looks like they do have the cash discrepancy. And I think the situation is somewhat in their favor because I think the return home from that road trip for Seattle is a little bit worse than New Jersey being in a letdown spot coming off of beating Vancouver. But it's another one I can't quite get there with that one either. And then the Islanders, by the way, I should have mentioned the Islanders against Columbus, which I mentioned a little while ago. I'm all over the place. I'm sorry I'm so discombobulated today. Islanders are down from -201 on the money line to -193, although it looks like they have 94% of the tickets on them. And this says 100% of the cash, which can't be true. But either way you look at it, they're going to be they're probably going to be a public play there, a public home favorite there, even though I think that the Islanders are in a bounce back spot after what they just came off of. Kind of embarrassing way to blow that game against a not good San Jose team. Columbus is coming off just that really tough loss where they were winning by 3 goals against LA, and they wound up dropping the game. That's tough to get back off the mat after that. What's the game going to be on, though? It's suspense, man. I've eliminated a lot of the possibilities. If you're looking at the market with me and you know how I read the market, maybe you'll know what I'm going to be on here. And that is going to be on the Nashville Predators. I've been on numerous of their games this year, and I don't think it's worked out that well, but I like the spot for Nashville. Looking at the market, it looks pretty good to me, as Tampa is a road public team there as a slight road underdog. They're getting the public action. They got 87% of the tickets, but 72% of the cash. So looks like they're the public road underdog there, maybe a square underdog there in Tampa Bay. People thinking there's value getting Tampa Bay at that plus money, that underdog price, thinking, why are they an underdog against Nashville when Tampa is probably the better team? Tampa's got Vasilevsky back, and they are above 500 now, and they've been looking a bit better recently. They've been playing pretty well. Nashville is also above 500, but only slightly. Actually, Tampa, if you factor in the overtime losses, they're actually below 500. But either way, I think people don't look at the overtime losses. I think when they look at the records that much, I think they tend to kind of look at them as like ties still. So it's, Tampa's actually above 500. Oh, okay. I think they're perceived as the better team, though, either way. They were a team in the playoffs last year. Nashville almost made the playoffs, but didn't. But I think it's a bad spot for Tampa as well. Nashville is up, I should have mentioned, from minus 105 to minus 111 on the money line, going against where those percentages are. So Tampa's got the public action and a little bit less of the cash. So the cash discrepancy is on Nashville as the anti-public home favorite, really. Their small favorite. It looks like there's reverse line movement in their direction as well. Tampa, I think, is in a bad spot. I thought they were in kind of a bad spot in their last game, but they were able to play another good game. So what spot are they in now? They played yesterday, so they're in a back-to-back, and they have to travel, even though it's just from Tampa to Nashville. But even so, what are they coming off of? The last 2 games, the last few games that they played were all fairly big. I guess you could say they returned home on November 30th and played Pittsburgh, which is a fairly big game. Pittsburgh still carries a lot of that name recognition. They've been playing decent recently, lost that game. Then they went out on the road for a weird single road game against Dallas and really just got blasted in that game, 8-1. And then they faced Dallas again right after that this Monday in that kind of a sort of zigzaggy spot there, the home and home, where they had just gotten destroyed by Dallas 2 days before that in Dallas. They showed up and they got revenge on Dallas, and they beat them in a shutout 4-0 after losing them 8-1 in Dallas. They beat them at home 4-0. That was a big win for Tampa against a good Dallas team. And then coming off that, they did not suffer the letdown. They had Pittsburgh again, and maybe they were seeking that quick revenge against Pittsburgh because Pittsburgh had just beaten them in their house, and they were on their home ice again. They beat Pittsburgh 3-1. Nice win. They've been playing well. Vasilevsky played in all of those games. Looked pretty good for Tampa in those last 2, but now I think is maybe where the letdown spot comes in. They're on a back-to-back. They've played, this is their 3rd game in 4 days, 4th game in 6 days, and actually the 5th in 8 as well, and 6th in 10, and 7th game in the last 11 days as well, going all the way back to when they were on the road at Colorado and at Arizona. So they are not a very rested team right now. They've played a lot of games here, although in this the last 2 games they played were both at home, so this is not a 3rd game in 4 days, all in different cities, but it is. They are traveling between yesterday and today. They're starting a road trip, which you might say sometimes that like gives you focus, but in this case, I think maybe it's a momentum disruptor because you were playing well at home. You had a nice 2-game homestand where you won both games against pretty good teams, pretty big name teams, and now you're going out on the road with no time off. I don't think it's a good spot for Tampa. I think this is where the letdown spot comes in. It looks like the market agrees with me. In Nashville, yeah, I mean, they're also on a win streak, and they are returning home, but they do have a day off. So their road trip was only 2 games, and it didn't really take them that far. They won both games. They went to Buffalo and Chicago, but not impressive wins, beating Buffalo and Chicago. In Chicago, they had to go into a shootout to do it, and that game was not looking that good for Nashville there. They were losing the game by 1 goal multiple times in that game, including fairly late in the game, later in the third period. Well, yeah, in the second half of the third period, they were able to tie that game. Wait, what happened in that game? Oh, it was a shootout. Yeah, right, exactly. Yes, they were able to tie that game, and then they won in the shootout after tying it in the third period. Nashville, yeah, the game was played pretty closely statistically, even though Nashville was the much more physical team in that game, really. And they did outshoot Chicago by a little bit, but not by much. So statistically, the shots were close. Face-off percentage was pretty close. But I think because Chicago's not really that good of a team, and you had to go into a shootout to beat them, now you have a day off. I think that's going to help you focus like a little bit. You have Tampa Bay coming into your house. Tampa Bay has been playing pretty well. I think Tampa Bay is in a letdown spot. So I like this. I like Nashville here. The market looks like it's in agreement with me. It's the only play I'm going to be on today. So hopefully it winds up getting there. They know Tampa Bay was a playoff team last year. I think you're going to be focused. You're coming off wins against a couple of teams that aren't as good, a couple of lesser teams. You have 1 day off, whereas Tampa does not. So you get to return home and now play Tampa there. It's a little bit of a shorter trip, I guess, for Nashville too than it is for Tampa in this one. And Nashville has that day off, so they're in a little bit of the better travel and rest spot there, I would say, despite it being a return from a road trip. Again, like I said, it's a short road trip. Market looks like it's in agreement with me. That's going to be it. And then I would point out that it's not confirmed yet, but it looks like the likely starting goalie matchup in this game, it looks like Tampa won't have Vasilevsky starting in net tonight because he's played the last 4 games, and this is a back-to-back, and they have not had much time off, so it looks like they might rest him tonight. So it might be Johansson back in net after he's had that many games off, and Vasilevsky is the better goalie, even though he hasn't been that good since he's come back from injury. I think he's sort of getting back into that rhythm or whatever. And you might say, well, Johansson might already be in that rhythm because he was playing earlier in the season, but now he's had like a break. He's had a lot of time off, so I don't know if that might disrupt his momentum now. Having that many days off there, although they lost the last game that he played, the last couple of games he played, they lost. So I don't know what to think about that. I think he is the worst of the 2 goaltenders there. So that's not an advantage for Tampa for sure. I think that is more helpful to Nashville there if that is the case. It's not confirmed yet, but if that is the case, that's another slight advantage to Nashville there if Tampa has their worst of their 2 goaltenders playing, whereas Nashville, I believe, it looks like they're projected to at least have Saros in net here. He's played the last 2 games. He plays most of their games for them, really. They give him a break once in a while, but because they had yesterday off, I kind of expect Saros to be in there, and he's the better of their 2 goalies. So that's it, man. That's the way I look at that. And I took Nashville. What did I take them at? Minus 108. So a little bit less than the standard, like minus 110 price that might be out there. I think you'll probably be able to get a price somewhere in that range. That's going to do it for me, man. Tower Gang Toad. Check out my NFL video that I just posted with 3 plays in there. Let's have another good, let's have a good day. Let's bounce back from yesterday's very small loss. Let's keep being hot, man. Be hot. Being hot is the best. I am not, but I'm not, but I would imagine that it is great. All right. Peace out.